Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shaelene and today I am doing my July wrap up. I am quite happy with myself. Throughout July I actually read quite a few books, so this is probably going to be a bit of a long wrap up, so we should probably just jump right on into it. First book that I read in the month of July was actually one that carried over from June. So this is When Women Ruled the World by Cooney. This is Six Queens of Egypt. So basically this details three really well-known queens of Egypt: Nefertiti, Cleopatra, and Hatshepsut. And then we have three lesser-known queens: Arneth, Nefersobek, and Taruset. You get kind of the overall history of how those queens came into power, because Egypt's monarchy is very patriarchal, but there always needs to be a queen on the throne with a king. I feel like this book is a good starter into the world of different female queens of Egypt. So you do get a short and quite concise history about, you know, how they came to power, what the time was like with political issues, and just overall climate of Egypt, and you know why it is that these queens, we don't either know much about them, or the reign was maybe short, or you know whatever happened. So I would really recommend this if you wanted to know more about some more lesser known queens. I feel like if you're really into the subject of Egyptology, you've already heard of Nefertiti and Cleopatra and Hatshepsut, but because we have three lesser known queens, we get to learn a bit more about them, and the author does offer a bibliography as to the reference that she used to other works that you can use for further reading if you prefer. So you do get a history of those three lesser known queens, and I feel like that's nice, because if you read a lot of Egyptology, then you keep hearing about the same people over and over. So I feel like it's nice to hear about some of the more lesser known queens. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. There were some parts that I felt were kind of boring. It was just kind of a slow read in places, because it is history. Sometimes, you know, it can be slow, but this book also shares a very strong feminist view towards leadership from women, and especially in the ancient world, how that was able to take hold in a time where obviously women were still treated less than, although in Egypt they had considerably more rights than their neighbors, Greece and Mesopotamia and places like that. So it is an interesting look at female rulership in ancient times, but it also brings some parallels to female rulership in modern day, and how some of those themes are still very similar and very present in modern times, and how, you know, it's not much has really changed. So it's an interesting one. I thought the book was well thought out. The points that the author was trying to make came across very easily. The histories were very nice to learn about. There were great notes in this as well as a very extensive list of bibliography. So if you do choose to want to read about a certain queen more, you can, and there's great resources for that. So yeah, overall I gave this a 3.5 stars. It was quite enjoyable. I learned quite a few new things. The next book that I read is a book that is a part of a series. I read The Vanishing Star by Maureen Johnson. This is book 2 of the Truly Devious trilogy. So I bought this after I was really hooked on the last book, Truly Devious, obviously. There was a cliffhanger in that book, so I needed to know what happened in this one. So I bought it. I devoured it in like 2 days. Stevie returns to Ellingham Academy. I won't spoil it for those who haven't read this yet and plan on reading it, because it is part of a series. But basically, crazy things happen. We kind of find out what happened to Ellie, and we also get to find out what really happened with the Truly Devious murders. There's also a bigger plot going on. And Stevie and David, the romance develops. Now, this book is a very thrilling ride. It's satisfying, and I really enjoyed, you know, figuring out the mystery and all of the intricate pieces of that Ellingham puzzle and the riddles and the overall mystery. What happened? What really ruined this book for me was the romance between Stevie and David. It's cringy as hell. It's so cringy. There is a scene where they're in a tunnel exploring this here tunnel, which they're not supposed to be in, and a romantic scene happens, and there's a line which I will read the quote to you. It says, "When her lips met his, she felt something release inside of her, something she didn't know she had been holding. There was something frantic about the way she kissed him. Like being with him was the only way she could breathe." Yeah, this series didn't need a romance. It's totally unnecessary. It brings nothing, absolutely nothing, to the plot of this book. And I am terrified that by the time the third book comes out and I read that, this romance is going to ruin the entire series for me. I'm pretty positive that's gonna happen. Stevie is such a strong character, and the story would have been so much stronger and so much better without a romance. The mystery alone could stand on its own. Yeah, I don't like romance in books, if you can't tell, especially when I'm really involved in a series and I really actually like the mystery that's going on, but then the romance comes in and just ruins it. So I am now invested in this series. I have to keep going with it. There's not much else I can do because I still want to know what happens, but I just don't care about David. Somebody just needs to kill him off. Please kill him off. So yeah, I rated this book a 4-star. It's possibly a 3.75 star. I don't know. If there was no romance, this would have been a 5-star book. Didn't need a goddamn romance. Alright, so the next book I read was an ebook. This is Hypatia, Her Life and Times by Faith L. Justice. So this is basically a short nonfiction book that compiles essays written by the author about Hypatia and her life and everything involving Hypatia. So if you don't know who Hypatia is, you should probably Google her. She was this here amazing female philosopher and mathematician in Hellenistic times who basically, a pretty amazing lady, met a very, very tragic death. I read this before and this was a reread for me. I really love the blog post in this because it gives you a quick and short and kind of like concise history while also providing a bibliography so you can go and do further reading on the subject. With Hypatia, there isn't a lot of historical records about her life or what we know about her, so it's hard to actually find a biography on her that is realistic and closest to the truth as we can get, you know, without distorting the truth. So I feel like this collection provides a very insightful and quick and accessible way to read about her. Basically, a lot of the myths about Hypatia's life are debunked in this short novel. So overall, it's a wonderful introduction to the world of Hypatia. If you want to learn about her, I suggest you go and get this off of, it should still be on iTunes. I purchased this a while ago, like a few years ago, so don't know 100% if it's still there, but it is a great introduction. So I gave this a 4-star. So the next book I'm going to talk about is an ebook. This is also an ARC provided to me by NetGalley, Harlequin, and Anchor Press in exchange for an honest review. So I am not going to go into detail about this book here. I'm going to be making a separate video on that a week before the publication date of this book. I'll put the date that I'll be posting that video on the screen. So A Crown of Coral and Pearl by Mira Rutherford is about these two twin sisters, Nor and Sadie, they live in this here kingdom called Veneria. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. But they basically live in this here kingdom kind of in the middle of the ocean, and every generation the prettiest girl is chosen to go to the neighboring kingdom, Ilara, to become the crown queen, marry the king or the prince or whatever. Sadie is set to be chosen. Everybody knows she's going to be chosen. Something tragic takes place and Sadie can no longer go. The Venerians fear that they will suffer retaliation if they don't send Sadie. So instead they send Noor, who has a scar. So they cover up the scar. They send her to this here kingdom, and while Noor is at court, she uncovers all of these here secrets. There's this prince called Prince Saren. He is a very unpleasant guy. He's kind of a bit of a weirdo. He's very cruel. I don't know how much of that was recorded. So I gave The Crown of Coral and Pearl 3.75 stars. So the next book I read was The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery. This is one of the only adult novels that Ellen Montgomery wrote, and the writing style between her children's novels and her adult novels really doesn't change at all. The subject matter isn't really all that scandalous. For the time it might be. There is some talk, I guess, of some things that would be considered scandalous for young women back in the day. So basically, Valency Sterling is a 29-year-old unmarried woman, presumably in the early, 1900s. And her life is pretty much controlled by her mother and her aunt. And she's just a dutiful daughter, and she tries not to cause too much disruption until she gets a diagnosis that pretty much says, you're gonna die within the year. She keeps this diagnosis hidden from her family, and she kind of begins to act out. She starts to say whatever the heck she feels like saying to her family, who are incredibly insufferable, and she starts doing whatever she pleases. So Valency kind of ends up leaving her mother and her family and goes and looks after a sick friend who the town believes is a whore and was disgraced. So when she goes to look after this dying friend, she also moves in with the town's really rowdy drunk who is hilarious, by the way. And then after events take place, she goes and moves in with this here young man who has a lot of rumors about him. His name is Barney Snaith, and he is believed to be a convict escaped from prison. He's supposed to have murdered people and robbed from banks and done all this villainous and morally corrupt things, but it's just all rumors, as Valency believes. So she is charmed by this young man, and they move in together. They end up even getting married, and they really don't know much about one another. Lots of things take place, some surprises happen, and it ends up being such a great book. It's hilarious. I laughed my butt off. It's charming, it's sweet, and even though there is a romance in this, which you guys know I don't like romance all that much, it's just something about Ellen Montgomery's writing, and when she writes romances, it makes me swoon. So this is pretty much the only type of romance I will read is Ellen Montgomery. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this novel. It was so good. It was the perfect read for the summer. I loved it. I really, really loved it. It's great. If you love Ellen Montgomery, I 100% recommend it. It's so good. So this quickly ended up becoming a favorite of mine, like most of Ellen Montgomery's books, so I ended up giving this a 5-star. It was just so good. So the next book I read was Sadie by Courtney Summers. A lot of people have hyped this book up. I hyped myself up for this book. I've been wanting to read this for so long, so I was feeling really, really terrible one day, and I was pretty much stuck in bed, not feeling very well, so I ended up reading this in a day. It's a pretty short book. The format in which it's told is pretty quick to read. So basically, Sadie follows our main character, Sadie, as she goes to get revenge on whom she thinks is her sister's rapist and killer. Now, this here killer is someone that is known to her and someone that has definitely caused trauma to her in the past. So, huge trigger warning. This book deals with a lot of pedophilia, child molestation, rape, murder, alcoholism, and drug abuse. This is not a light YA mystery. This is very heavy. It's so heavy, and it's sad, and it really opens you up to the evil that's in this world. I also think it's known before going into this that the scenes of rape or child molestation are not explicitly shown, which is good, but the insinuation that it has happened is enough to make you have this sickening pit in your stomach, and the way that the character has flashbacks to those events can be traumatizing if you have ever experienced something like that in the past. Even just reading it, if you haven't experienced anything like that, it's sickening. So I think that's important to keep in mind. So basically, this follows a podcast called The Girls as Wes McCrae comes to Sadie's small town. He hears of Sadie's story and he begins to document what has happened. And he relies on the people that Sadie has encountered throughout her revenge journey, if you will, to track her down. And alternatively, we have Sadie, who is on this journey to find her sister's killer, yeah, the result is just, it's powerful, it's heart-wrenching, it's sickening. Overall, it is a really sad and heavy and dark story. So the only part I did not like about this book was the ending. I felt like the ending left a lot to be desired. We spend the entire book, there's gonna be a spoiler, so if you don't want to know what happens, I'll put a timestamp and you can skip ahead. But basically, we don't get a conclusion to the story. We spend the entire time in this book reading about Sadie and reading about Wes McCrae trying to find Sadie and find out what happened to her, only for the book to end and we still don't know where Sadie is. We still don't know what has happened to her. We don't know if she's alive or she's dead. I guess some people would like that ending, but I still needed more of a conclusion. And that just kind of didn't happen with this book, unfortunately. But overall, it's a gripping read. I mean, I read this in one day and I did not feel good, but I just couldn't put it down. So yeah, it's a 4.5 star, definitely. It would have been probably a 5-star read if the ending had more of a conclusion. I really hope that this book will be adapted by Netflix into some sort of TV show, because I think it would be amazing. I watched Sharp Objects and I feel like this could follow a similar kind of eerie feel. I feel like this would be such a good Netflix or HBO adaptation. Like, somebody needs to do an adaptation of this book. It is so good. So the next book I read was another reread. This is Skin&Earth Volume 1 by Lights. This is Lights, the ALT pop artist Canadian phenomenon that is the genius Lights. She made a comic book to go along with her album Skin&Earth, which I have here. So what I did this time, I have read this before, as I said. Lights actually recommends that you read this while listening to the album. So that is what I did this time, and it was my first time reading this in a physical copy. This is a genius. I really hope she does a volume 2 of this, because it's just, it's wonderful. It's truly wonderful. When you listen along with the album, there is a corresponding song to each chapter. You listen to the album track by track, and you read it, and the tracks correspond with the chapters, which I just think is genius. When you reach a chapter, there's a QR code that you can scan, and that QR code takes you to exclusive content that either relates to the comic book or the chapter. So when you scan the QR code, it will take you to the Light's website, which has the song that corresponds to that chapter, the music video that was made, the acoustic making of that song, and also any related merch. And it's honestly pretty incredible. It's just so awesome that when you read this and when you listen to the album at the same time, the story really comes alive, and it really provides a great soundtrack for the book. And it's just an overall really immersive reading experience, and I freaking loved it. I mean, not only is the artwork amazing, the song's amazing, I love the album. It's just so good. It's so good. So yeah, I rated it as a 4-star. But honestly, I love it. I feel like also this is definitely a niche book, project, because I feel like if you're not a Lights fan, you're probably not going to like it as much as someone who's a really big fan of Lights like I am. So just keep that in mind, but it's still a really good story. The writing is surprisingly really good. The story's really good. It's just good. The next book that I read was Into the Drowning Deep by Mira, who is also known as Shaelene McGuire. I read this on ebook, and it took me a while to get through this one. Not because I didn't like the story, it was just because I was scared that it was going to get scary, even though this was a horror novel. So that really didn't make sense, but I also wasn't feeling reading at that moment. But yeah, anyways. This follows basically a crew of scientists who go on this here big ship that's pretty much a floating science lab, and they go out to try to figure out what has happened to this previous ship that was launched by this entertainment company. I think it's called Imagine Entertainment, and basically a voyage that took place a few years before resulted in the entire slaughter of the crew, and it was all done by mermaids, or what they believe to be mermaids. The second group of scientists go out on the water in search of these mermaids. The majority of the scientists on the vessel don't believe they're going to find mermaids. It's basically an opportunity for a lot of these scientists to go out and do the research on the state-of-the-art boat that's highly equipped to facilitate their science. So we follow a few characters who do believe in these mermaids, who have a personal connection to the tragedy that happened. So we follow Tori. She is this here acoustic biologist. She picks apart sounds in the oceans and attributes them to whatever certain animals, certain boats, and ocean sounds pretty much. And her research basically shows that these here supposed mermaids that are on the bottom of the ocean are mimicking these sounds of whales and even the engine sounds of the ship that all the crew were on that got slaughtered on the previous voyage. And Tori's sister Anne was on that voyage and died. So it's a personal journey for her. She wants to figure out if there are actually mermaids. I mean, she believes that there are mermaids, and I guess she wants to destroy them all or get revenge or see. I don't know exactly what she wants. But we follow her and her partner, who is also kind of like a cryptozoologist who believes in mermaids. It's going to be the first cryptozoologist to discover mermaids. And then we have a doctor, Dr. Gillian Toth, who is a marine biologist but also a sirenologist. She's pretty much the only sirenologist of her kind, and she believes that there are mermaids. She believes what they are fundamentally and biologically. And then we have a few other crew members here and there. We have a cameraman and the presenter for Imagine Entertainment. They are filming the voyage. we also have kind of the head guy who is kind of coordinating this for the entertainment company. I didn't write a review for this on Goodreads yet, okay? But basically, they all go out on this vessel, and guess what? Mermaids are real, slaughter happens, it's a gory kind of novel, but it's also really filled with science, and it's very heavy on the marine biology, which I really love because I wanted to be a marine biologist. Life had other plans. So I really enjoyed the science aspect of this novel. It was still a pretty solid book. Was it a favorite? No. I mean, it was good. I really liked the science, like I said, and the characters. But it was just a good book. It was nothing that I absolutely fell in love with. I didn't hate it. So this is probably a 3.5 star for me. It was still really enjoyable to read. It was kind of heavy on the info because obviously with scientists and something of this nature, you're going to need a lot of info on it. So very science heavy, but still very enjoyable for me. I really liked it. And the last book that I read is a very hyped up thriller in recent years. A lot of people either love this book, hate this book. The author is also very controversial. So I read The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I was hesitant to read this book because of the author. He's been accused, I guess. I don't know. It's been kind of proven that he basically lied about having a brain tumor. He lied about his parents being sick and dying or having them be dead and all this kind of crazy stuff. Just look up his name and there's a huge article on it. He basically faced having an illness multiple times, which I, as someone with a chronic illness and disability, have a huge problem with. So, you know, I was hesitant going into this. Basically, we follow our main character. I've already forgotten her name and I literally finished this a week ago. I think her name is Anne. Basically, she is stuck in her house because she's been through this here traumatic accident. She's scared to go outside. So she spies on her neighbors pretty much. And she uses a pretty powerful camera with pretty powerful lens to do so. So she sees something happen in her next door neighbor's house, the Russells. They just moved in, and she believes she has witnessed the murder of the wife of the Russells, but because she has so many mental health problems, she's an alcoholic on a lot of heavy medications that can make her hallucinate. She's mixing her medications with alcohol. The police believe her to be an unreliable witness and basically say that, you know, you didn't see anything, nothing happened, and she is basically brushed off, and it's made it to seem like she's gone crazy. So obviously, I don't want to spoil the book any more than that for you. This kind of fulfills a trope of mine that I really am getting so annoyed with when it comes to psychological thrillers, and that is having a female main character who has serious mental health problems, who is an alcoholic, who is mixing their medications and on a lot of heavy medications, and is, you know, said to have gone crazy pretty much. So she does experience to a certain degree sexism from the police, and especially one of the lead female investigators, for having witnessed this murder and basically saying, you know, nothing's happened, no murder took place, blah blah blah. But not only that, like, some of the plot lines are kind of predictable. It is a mystery. It was very thrilling. It was very page turning. I admit I couldn't put it down because I wanted to know what was happening. It was very easy to read through because the chapters were so short. They weren't very long. Overall, the events that transpired and what happened in the end wasn't really anything that shocking. Like, I kind of saw it coming and it wasn't that surprising. Like, it was just very lukewarm. I don't really understand the hype of this one because you can kind of see it coming from a mile away. It was okay. This is probably 3-star. Like, I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, enjoyed myself while reading it. That was my wrap up. If you guys like this video, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. You can go ahead and check me out on social media. My Instagram, my Goodreads, and my Twitter will be linked below. And I guess I will see you guys next time. Bye.